Hello there, I'm Howard Drury, and for some time I've been presenting Central Television's Gardening Time programme. And over the years I've visited gardens large and small with ponds and water features. Well, I'm pleased to be able to tell you that we've produced a video on the subject. It's one of a whole series. You can collect as few or as many as you like, but if you would like to learn how to build a pond and how to look after it, why not sit back and enjoy and see how simple it is to build a garden pond. Wouldn't you just love a pool like this in your garden? What's the constraints or the problems? Well, firstly, I think finance. Short term, maybe long term. Maybe we can't afford to do everything at once. Don't worry, we can add waterfalls, things like lighting at a later date. Think also of children, now and in the future. Are children likely to come into the garden, maybe run down the slope and into the pool? Or can we design it with things like the conifer here to stop them getting to the pool edge? What happens to all the soil we're going to dig out to build the pool? Can we use it to build a rockery or elsewhere in the garden? What happens if the pool overflows? What are the natural constraints around it? We don't want trees overhanging the pool where the leaves might cause problem by poisoning the fish, for instance. So we need to walk round the site, have a look at the natural constraints, the financial constraints, the family constraints. Make use of slopes in the site like this, where we can build a waterfall and bring the pool down to the lowest level, a nice natural informal pool. Maybe you haven't got that size of garden, maybe you've just got a small sunny patio. You could build a raised pool and a raised waterfall. That would work very nicely, especially if it's hot. You could fit Mediterranean style plants in. But you may not have a hot sunny patio, you may have a very private, secluded, cool garden. Doesn't get a lot of sun. We could turn it into a Japanese style garden. Maybe you've got a large garden. We could build a large pool and a series of large waterfalls. Build it in scale to the size of your garden. And if you're thinking of those children, you could build a raised pool, a little waterfall on the side so the children can't get at it. And if you want to do away with that lawn, then you could do by incorporating a series of fountains in a very long, large, formal pool. If you've only got a very small garden, what about a small D-shaped pool against the side of the wall? Just a little geyser oozing out of the wall, be most attractive. Or if you've got a larger wall, you could create almost a beach-style effect with pebbles and a pump just gushing water over the edge onto those pebbles. If you've only got a wee tiny garden, you can set those pebbles in a small circle with a pump underneath, and you get just the sound of gushing water, such a valuable, pleasant sound. So whatever size of garden, there's some kind of water feature that you can find that will please you and fit into the garden surrounding. So I've convinced you want to build a garden pool. Well, the first thing you need to decide on is how much money you've got available, both initially and in the long term. If your reserves are initially limited, you may just choose to purchase the pool liner and perhaps a pump, and then add the accessories like perhaps lights and a waterfall at a later date. Or you may choose to go for a whole package at one stage. Sometimes you can get quite a good discount by buying a complete package, plants, fish, pool liner, everything in one go. Having decided your budget, the next thing to do is to get yourself down to a really good plant and aquatic centre. Have a look round, get to know the staff, because they'll want to help you. They're well trained, they know what you want, and they know the answers, because you're bound to be bewildered by the range of products available. Think of the liners. Do you want a rigid one? Do you want a flexible one? What's the different types of materials that's available in the rigid and the flexible? Talk to the staff. Listen to their advice about the limitations of a rigid pool on the size, the shape you want, perhaps one or two problems installing it. Compare with that, perhaps, the range of flexible liners. You can almost buy them off the roll here. Perhaps again you're puzzled by the different materials, so let's give you a little insight perhaps. At the bottom there we've got one that's been around many years, very popular. That's butyl. It hasn't really changed a great deal in price. It's got a guaranteed lifespan of something like 15 years. It's great for the larger pools. It can be welded together into huge sheets. It's quite easy to install. And of course we've had various shorter lifespan materials, guaranteed perhaps 5 or 10 years, often with quite a lot of plastic in them, but they don't degrade in the sun, so there's no problems there. They're much cheaper, some limitations on large pools, so they're ideal for that smaller pool, much cheaper in fact. And then a few years ago along came a new product which was quite fascinating for me. I've tried it in my own garden. It's called Absat. It actually has the properties of butyl. It's strong, but it stretches. And the interesting thing is it's only about 2/3 of the price, so that's quite a saving if you're on a budget job. But more importantly for me, it's got a guaranteed 20-year lifespan on it. So it might go 20, 25, even 30 years. So Absat's perhaps a product to look for. You can buy it loose, sections like this, the length that you want. I'll tell you how to do the maths a little later. Make sure you always get enough, because it's more difficult to bring it back and change for a larger one later. Always take plenty of material. You can buy it loose, take it home like that, or you might choose to buy it in a box. Perhaps pay a few pence more for the privilege of having it put in that box. You know, there's some major advantages, particularly if you're a beginner. This particular box here, not only has got the size on it, it's got all the instructions down here on digging out, putting in the underlay. You might think, do I really need, if you're on a tight budget, to spend perhaps a considerable amount on lining that pool with a proper pool liner? It is worth it. It does save rupture in that liner when you put it in, and it's far better than the paper and newspapers, perhaps old carpets we used to use years ago. So think about including that in your first purchases. Think about taking that box home with all the instructions. Read the instructions before you even start work. If in doubt, come back to the centre here. But to go with that liner or rigid liner in your initial purchases, you're almost certain to want a pump. So let's have a look what's available. There's a bewildering array of pumps on the market, all different sizes, shapes, models. And this is where you're probably going to need a little bit of help from the people at the aquatic centres in choosing the right one for the right situation. There's several variable factors I'll explain in a moment. But, you know, even a small pump like this, delivering something like 85 or 90 gallons of water per hour, can be useful in the very small pool or perhaps a small container to deliver just a small amount of water as a fountain at the top. Not big enough for a waterfall pump, but there's a use for a budget-priced small pump in the small situation. And you go through the different sizes, the increase from 85 to 200, maybe even 250 gallons an hour output, such as this particular one here. But there's a couple of other variable factors other than the actual size of the pump, the number of gallons per hour of water or litres per hour of water it would deliver. It depends how deep in the pool that pump is placed and how high you're trying to push that water up as to how much water it can deliver. So the height is quite critical. The actual output of the pump is critical. And if you've got quite a long length of hose connected to it, you get a resistance along the walls of that hose. The longer the hose, the less pressure is delivered at the end, so less water comes out. In fact, some of the manufacturers make it very easy for you, because this particular one here, if I've got the right one, yes, let's get that somewhere nice and comfy here. You can see here, this is the particular model in question, and virtually with a fountain on the top, it'll deliver as much as 1,650 gallons an hour. But if we take the same pump and connect a length of hose, and we lift that some 15 feet up a waterfall, that falls to something like 400 gallons an hour. Quite a considerable drop in output. So this is, as I say, where you'll probably need a little bit of help, because you might think on first signs, oh, 85 or 200 gallons is quite sufficient. It's these other variable factors that really reduce the output. In some cases, they've improved design as well. Now, if you remember years ago, garden pumps were on the go. The pumps didn't really last a long while. There were a number of things that went wrong. There were moving parts. Today, we've reduced those to an absolute minimum. In there is an armature, a series of windings of mains cable in there, encased in a waterproof material. Nothing moves, nothing leaks, nothing can go wrong. So that is a sealed half. The other half consists of this part here. And the electromagnetism drives around that bearing there. And you can see there as it turns, the white bearing in the middle, that's a ceramic bearing. It's very hard wearing, it's very long lasting, and it's unlikely to go wrong. But in the event of anything really going wrong, the nice thing with most of these pumps today is you can get replacement parts. all the parts that move are replaceable. So when you make a considerable investment in a pump, it's going to be a very long-term investment because you can repair it. And of course, most of the pumps come with quite a small filter to filter out any particles that could be entering that pump, because it's those particles, particularly if they're dirt particles, that can wind and wear away at those bearings and cause them to wear. So a good filter on the front is well worthwhile. So that's the pumps. We've selected the right one with the help of the staff. Don't only be too helpful because you can easily make a mistake there. Get one that's plenty big enough sooner than one that's too small. And of course then you need to get electricity to the actual pond site. Now, I'm quite happy at doing electric. Some of you might be a little wary of mains electricity. If you are, then get a qualified electrician in, because you really want to deliver from the house or the garage supply a sheathed or armoured cable to the site, so you're unlikely to chop it with a spade or anybody's likely to cut through it and get an electric shock. Then you can fit a variety of electrical fittings to distribute the electricity to perhaps the pump, the lighting, to the pool heater in winter. You may use small plugs to actually distribute it to make connection easier. I say small plugs because we don't use 13 amp conventional plugs. We use something like this. Now these are regarded as splash proof. They're not waterproof, so you never ever throw them into the pond. And I know some people will still be wary of electricity. So whether you're using an armoured cable or not, it's possible to fit a device back at the house. This is important. Back at the mains distribution. A device known as an RCB, which stands for Residual Circuit Breaker. Sounds a mouthful, but very basically, these devices, either plugged like that into a 13 amp socket, can be used for any outdoor electrical equipment or indoor, and in literally 1/30th of a second, they will cut the power off if they sense an imbalance between the live and neutral supplies. 1/30th of a second, and it takes around about 1/30th of a milliamp. So there's not much give or take. If there's any fault in your electrical system, any dampness, or anybody cuts the cable, that would trip out before anybody received a fatal shock. But let's go back to that pond pump. Now here's a typical pump. You're perhaps thinking, well, what on earth's that? Now, I mentioned earlier one of the problems was dirt and particles being sucked into the pump and causing it to wear. But you also get algae and other material drawn in, which eventually can block the filters and cause the pump to stop. So what they've done here, very cleverly, here's the conventional pump and the outlet at the top. There is the drawing in pipe, and it goes down into a very large piece of foam that's mounted very cleverly into a block that holds the pump and the sponge. That means you've got a filter within the pond system that stops any dirt getting into that pump and ruining it, and it means you get nice clean water delivered out of it. So you can get pond pumps and filters combined together to go into the pond. But there's all sorts of types of filters. This is a biological filter, and it really carries out two processes. Firstly, at the base there's a series of brushes, very similar in fact to this one here, and they physically remove any particles floating around in the water. They cling to it. This can be washed out periodically in a bucket of pond water, never fresh water, or should destroy the biological activity around those brushes. So wash it out. And then the water is passed from that chamber to this chamber, which is normally filled with a thing called Hortag. This is a biological medium. Now I've got some down here, so let me just explain what this actually does. It's an expanded clay granule that's placed in there, and over a period of weeks it becomes colonised with beneficial bacteria, and these take away any harmful toxins or chemicals in the water. Now you're perhaps saying harmful chemicals and toxins? I've only just got my pool. So this may be something that you leave on that list for later. There's all sorts of additions like ultraviolet lights you can add to get rid of algae. It's expensive, but be aware of them, because you may, if you don't keep a balanced pond, a balance of plants and fish in relation to the size of the pool, you may need to resort to something like that to keep your water clean and growth of plants and fish really top class. So that's something you might not want to purchase. But I'll tell you what, if you were to look along the chemical shelves, you'd see all sorts of chemicals offered for sale. The only thing at this stage as a beginner you really need to look at are the conditions and algicides that you may want to use to get the balance of water right. When you've filled that pond up with tap water, there may be harmful toxins there that these bacteria haven't yet got a chance of balancing out naturally in the pool. So you use a conditioner or algaecide to clean the water before we introduce the fish and the plants. Very often the water goes pea green to start with. Don't keep refilling your pond, just let it settle. Once you've got the plants in, it'll gradually clear, and if it doesn't, resort to various types of filters and other little tricks. So we don't worry about most of those things. If you are worried what sort of condition that water's in, you can get little testers. That particular one tests whether the soil is, or the water rather, is acid or alkaline. That affects the growth of the plants and the fish. Other tests calibrate whether there's excess nitrates or not enough nitrates in the water, so we can work on balancing the pool out before we stock it with plants and fish. So you might want a test, you might want a conditioner or an algaecide. If you're stocking the pool in the autumn with plants and fish, and you're right perhaps to mid-September, then you might want to, in the autumn, introduce a pool heater. That stops an area of the pond freezing in the winter to allow the gases to come up from the fish or any rotting vegetation in the pool. Quite a useful little thing. And during the winter, I often find leaves blow into my pond. So around about perhaps the end of September, early October, I would purchase a net, something like that. And I would peg this over the pond to stop any leaves blowing in. It also stops any herons or anything like that wading in and pinching those new fish we've just put in. So a net is quite useful. Another little trick is perhaps a thermometer. That's useful for determining the water temperature when you're feeding the fish. When you become more experienced, you'll know just when to throw in those flakes of pellets. And the answer is when they actively eat them. If they quickly consume what you throw in, then you feed them at that time of the year. If they don't quickly eat them within 15 minutes or so, you don't give them any more during cold spells when fish go deeper down into the pond. So those are just some of the products you might want to look at and think about buying, either now or later. The other important thing to think about buying are those plants and possibly some fish. When you look around the plant section of the aquatic centre, you'll find all shapes and sizes of plants. Some with the foliage above water, some with the foliage on the water, and some with the foliage actually underneath the water. So what's the secret? Well, really there are 4 elements to the plants in the garden pool. I'll show you this with a diagrammatic view of a pool here. If you look on this first shelf, you can see there's some containers there with plants that we will call marginals. It's a wide range of plants. Some are grown for the foliage effect, some for the flowers. But as a general rule, they don't like a great amount of water on top of the root system. Somewhere between 1 and 6 inches, 2.5 and 15 centimetres of water above the root to the surface. That's marginals, often grown in individual baskets, or you can sometimes get a pool made with a little pocket in, known as a marginal planting pocket. The second group are those that go in the deeper water, and I call these the deep plantings. And it usually includes things like the water lilies, where they're grown in containers on the actual base of the pool, or small little pillars to adjust them to the correct depth according to the variety. The third group of plants in the pool are very important. They're called oxygenators. Usually grown in little containers like that or planting baskets. They form large mats at the base of the pool, coming to the surface. The fish swim in and out of these. They help keep the water nice and clean and maintain a balance in the pool. The fourth group, you don't need many of these even in a small pool. 2 or 3 is sufficient, a large pool, a couple of dozen perhaps. Those are the floating plants. Things like the water lettuce, the water hyacinth and the water soldier. And they just float on the surface. Most of them are fairly hardy, but they're not all truly hardy. You come to a plant centre like this, you wander up and down, and the first thing you see are water lilies. You see all sorts of lovely pictures. Then you begin to realise there are so many, which do I pick? Well, you might need a little bit of help. You'll need to be able to tell the staff the depth of your pool and the rough surface area, because in all cases there's a ratio as to the number of plants you want to the size of your pool. In the case of water lilies, let me get an example to show you. They only live in certain depths of water, and there are 4 types. This is what we call a pygmea. It's suitable for very shallow ponds, makes a small surface area of leaves, and only wants perhaps 4 to 10 inches of water above the actual top of the pot. The second group, they need a little more water, perhaps 8 to 15 inches, and I would call those dwarfs. The third group, we're getting a little more vigorous, if you like, as far as the leaf size goes. They need somewhere around perhaps 15, 18 inches, even 20 inches of water above the top of the pot to the surface of the pond. The fourth group, I've got a lovely example down here. These are the vigorous ones. These are only suitable for very large pools. You can tell by the leaf size here, they're going to make quite big plants, and they would destroy the balance in a small pool. As a general rule, 30 to 40% of the surface area needs to be covered by one of those 4 types of plantings. That's the marginals, the deep water plantings, the lilies, etc., the oxygenators, or the floaters. This would take over and throw the pool out of balance. Talking of balance, there's an easier way to show you than this. Let me just nestle that back in the bottom, let it go right down. And let me take you over to our demonstration pool and show you the ratio over there. All 4 of the elements we were talking about earlier are represented in this pool. We've got the marginals on this shelf here, a lovely example of one of the iris there, just about ready for dividing in this particular case, growing in an aquatic basket. And any planting or any maintenance on the plants, dividing, etc., can be carried out from April to September. The earlier in the year you do it, the more chance they've got to become established. So that's the time scale. So there's a range of foliage and flowering marginals. The second thing we told you about were those deep water plants. Things like the water lily here, and there's a lovely example there. The leaf is just sitting on the surface of the water. Now, if you put your water lily in and the leaves go under the water, you need to build a little pillar, perhaps of bricks or something like that, to lift the pot up so the leaves just float like that. So that's the second group of plants, the deep water ones. The third group were those floaters, and I just love these. Look at things like the water lettuce there. Almost looks tropical. It's not too hardy, perhaps if you're in north of England and Scotland, but it's a nice plant, the water lettuce. Then we've got things like the water hyacinth. Well, I don't know if the flowers really like a hyacinth. I suppose the only thing you can say is perhaps the colours like some of the hyacinths. It's rather attractive. That floats around. Those are 2 of the 3 I mentioned. The third floater is one that actually moves around in the pool, not just on the surface, but up and down to a certain degree. It's hiding in here. This is the water soldier. And I love this because it sort of stands sentry over the pool, if you like, and it seems to float somewhere around about 3 or 4 inches below the surface most of the summer. So hyacinth, lettuce, soldier. That was group 3. The last group were those oxygenators. You know, for years people have thought about just throwing these plants in, like the floating plants. I don't think that's quite right. I think they need anchoring to the bottom. Now here's a little tip for you. Doesn't matter whether it's oxygenators, whether it's a lily or any of the deep water plants. What I do is to get a length of string, something like that, thread it through the sides of the pot. And if this was a large pot, say a water lily container, might want 2 pieces of string and 2 people. It is possible to manoeuvre this even over a fairly large pool, and with the help of a colleague on the opposite bank, to lower it just where you want in the pool. There he goes, down to the bottom like that, gently watching what you're doing so that it lands on the bottom upright. And if you've done things right, you gently pull on that cord, there's no knots in it, you can pull it out and leave the water lily or the oxygenators just where you want in that pool. So that's placing them in position. So those are the 4 elements of the garden pool we were talking about earlier, and in most cases those plants will be ready potted. However, that's not always the case. It depends on the garden centres. Traditionally, many of the plants were sold bare-rooted. There's an example here of a water lily that you might purchase in this condition, in which case you need to pot them. You may also be offered water lilies, but a little word of warning there. You need to know how vigorous it is, preferably the name of the variety. It may be too vigorous for the smaller pools. So do ask, if necessary, politely decline it, and go back to the garden centre and buy one. Maybe a saving in the long run. But if you do get presented with something like this, then you need to pot it into a basket, something like this. This is a traditional lily basket, and we need to line it with a piece of hessian to stop the soil falling through the sides. However, more recently there's been an improvement on that. We now use one with a finer mesh in. That stops the soil spilling through. I say soil because that's not really true. we don't use ordinary garden soil. It might have nitrates in it, chemicals in it, that would harm the balance of the pool, could even kill the plants. So we must use a proper pond soil, very low in nutrients. So that is quite essential. And we plant it in the same manner as any traditional pot plant. But we leave room to put a good layer of this washed gravel around the neck of it. We then water the plant before we put it in the pool to wash off any dust particles, any fine particles of soil wash out of the basket. Then we lower it into the pool as we were discussing earlier. So that's if you're given one. You may find some garden centres still offering aquatic plants in traditional plant pots. I don't like placing those in the pool personally. I think they break up very rapidly, they're unsightly, and it's far better to transfer them either singly or 2 or 3 to a proper aquatic basket. You plant your pool up, then you let it settle. Might take 3, 6, even 8 weeks to settle down. And then only do we go out and choose the fish and add the fish to the pool. If I were choosing fish for my garden pond, my number 1 choice would have to be the goldfish. Maybe looking at these and thinking, well, surely these are not goldfish. They are. They're known as sarasa, which in Japanese means red spots on the back. And it just illustrates how wide a range of goldfish there are. These are superb fish for the garden pool. They're hardy, and what's more, they'll feed themselves. But if you do throw those flakes or pellets onto the surface, they'll rise and take the pellets, and you'll see the full beauty of these fish. Another fish I would put on my choice of musts for the garden pool is the tench. I think the tench is very useful as a scavenger at the base of the pond. They're rarely seen at the surface, but they go around just gently stirring the base, eating away at debris, etc., making them a good choice for the small and large pool alike. In the case of the small pool, just a couple is all that's needed. These are traditional goldfish, but they've been selected. The best forms have been selected. Those with good fin shape, good colour. And when you are picking fish for your pool, always ask the staff to pick out those that are active, those that look healthy, those that dart about in the pool. You're sure you're getting the best quality fish and the best value for money. Aren't they beautiful? They're shibunkins, and I just love these. I think there's probably 5 colours make up the pigments of their scales, and you get them ranging from almost pure white through to yellows, oranges, reds, through to very dark, almost black. They're so graceful fish with those large tail fins, and they just seem to glide about in the garden pool. They're perfectly hardy and can be treated in exactly the same way as the common goldfish. These are golden orth, often seen on the surface of pools, and they normally congregate in 5s or 7s. They're shoal fish, if you like. They're very active fish. They dart around the pool, particularly in the evening after flies and things on the surface. So they're not suited to the small pool. Another slight word of warning is that they tend to use a lot of oxygen in their rapid movements. So it's worth having one of these pond pumps with a filter in, or a waterfall to provide that vital oxygen. Having brought all the bits and pieces home and decided where we're going to build this pool, first thing to do is get a feel of scale, of size. Mark it out. What I would do is mark it out with a piece of garden hose. It's nice and easy to move round, just to the shape, the curves that you want. I've laid this in roughly the shape I think will look right for the size of area I've got. That's important, the scale in relation to the surrounding plants, etc. Having laid it down, the next thing to do is to peg it if you're not very sure. And I might move this, so I think a few small pegs just to hold it in place while we cut round the actual shape of the pool. That'll hold it down perfectly. Next stage is to start cutting around with a half moon or edging iron. And remember, when we're using these, we tend to cut just away from the actual edge of the line so we don't catch anything on the way. Keep it going all the way round, and that is going to be the very edge of the pool. So I'll work all the way around the pool doing that, and then starts the hard work, because to start with I'm going to take a cube of soil out just to get myself a hole. Take it out something like that, and on this one, this is one for a flexible liner. I'll take this cube out, And what I'm going to do is to transfer the soil from here to the back to build that lovely rock garden at the back. So if you want to put a pool with a stream running into the pool, we can do it. So here goes the start of quite a long job and quite a lot of soil to move. Well, as you can see, there's quite a lot of soil to move when you're digging a pond this size. A couple of important points. If the soil is good, then we can use all of it for building something like a rock garden at the back, or we might choose to add perhaps a waterfall or a little tiny stream there to make a real feature. If you've got heavy subsoil, clay and things like this, you may choose to get rid of them off the site completely, because it can be a problem with drainage. So really heavy subsoil I'd get rid of. And a couple of points on this gardening as well. When you've got this amount of soil to move, think of the effort. When you're shoveling and you want to be flat like that, try and use the shaft of the spade against the knee and use the knee muscles to get some leverage on it when you take it out. And the same, well, it's a lot of soil to move, same goes when you're moving it. Do a little, have a break, do a bit more. That way you'll save your back and you won't be so tired. So what are we doing here? Well, we're taking out the soil to create the hole for the liner. We're going to have a shelf either side, a deeper section in the middle, but we need to have it level. Otherwise the water's not going to look quite right with the surrounding features. So what I tend to do is to find myself a good long straight edge, something like this. Don't get the usual little tip, little squint down it. That's not bad, that'll do. And I'm driving in a series of pegs on the outside edge of the pool, because remember, the dugout area, particularly on this side, this is where the liner comes up. It's then going to be tucked into the surrounding area. So I need enough liner to go over there, and then I need to anchor it. And I want it level. So I'm driving in some pegs, something like that, 1.5 inch square, in areas around the perimeter of the dugouts section. Now these are driven in, and you need to start at an average height. And I've started on that one over there. Let me just move that and show you. You see there, that's where the top of the liner is going to come out of the pool. I can then pave on it around the front, around that row of pegs. And around the back here, I thought it'd be rather nice to go from paving to sections of rock. And I want that rock just to sit in the water so you don't see the liner. So when I place the soil at the back here, I'm leaving a little tiny gap. So that'll be the rock garden, and my rocks can come in the section here. Work round again till we come to another section of paving at the front edge. If I was going to add lighting or pond pump or a waterfall or anything, don't forget any pipe work that needs doing. We need to allow this stage for it, put any pipes in we need. Come to that in a minute or two. Back to this levels, because this is the important bit. This is what makes a pool, I think. If we take our spirit level on our straight edge, and you can see there that that is just about spot on level there. In other words, if that edge of the liner comes out of the water there and there, providing the pool is filled, we'll have a perfect rim all the way around. There won't be 1 inch one side and 2 inch the other. So we do that. Then we need to dig out to the right depth. I use a little tiny piece of wood. This is very useful. I'm going to create one shelf that deep, and I'm going to create the bottom of the pool that deep. Now remember, when you dig a pool, it's got to be deep enough for the fish to survive in winter if you're contemplating fish going in. So it's better to have it slightly deeper than a shallow pool where the fish might suffer. So make yourself a marking peg, go back to this, paste it across the pegs like that. We know now that that is level, and then if I place that at the front there, you can see that that shelf, if we come across there, is just the right depth. We've dug out just enough soil. I'm going to dig the same method on the far side. You can see I've not got down far enough there yet. And in the middle here, I need to dig out a lot more soil, because this is going to be the very deep centre of the pond. That needs to go down another 3 or 4 inches or so. So that's how I maintain levels, by working my way round. You know, it's all right talking about it. There's only one way to do it, and that's to get the spade out. And we should explain that this terrace is going to come all the way around there. We're going to have a deep section in the middle. So let's get on and start and move that soil out of the way, ready for the rock garden. And keep our levels as we work all the way round the edge of the terrace. As you can see there, we've nicely dug out the shelf, we've worked in the bottom, we've got a hole dug out for the lower layer. Let me explain though a little bit on how soil type affects the way you dig these shelves out. This is a fairly heavy soil here, so it will remain fairly sticky while it's moist, and we'll be able to keep an almost straight side to them. If you're lucky enough to live on one of those warm sandy soils, then I would suggest that you angle the sides something like 20 degrees or so they don't crumble in, particularly when you're walking around the edge or when we plant it on shelves. So the angle of the sides depends on soil type. It's also important just to have a quick little check that we are reasonably level, because we want the plant containers to sit on this shelf here. You see there, that's just about level. If it slopes inwards, there's a danger of the marginal plants sliding into the deeper area. They wouldn't be very happy. So we checked that. I've already checked across the pegs on the top here. You can see now we've taken all the turf away, and this is the area where the top of the liner is going to be held in place. It's quite important. What we're going to do, we're going to line the base of this, and that depends how you do it on what sort of soil you've got, but we're going to line it, and then we're going to put the liner itself in, bring it up over the shelf, up the side here. We're going to lay it on there and slab on this particular section. You could use, if you choose, to put another layer of turf upside down and then a layer of turf right way up and grass right to the edge of the pool. That looks great in a natural situation. Or you might want to walk around the pool and you're going to slab around the edge. So that's the finished level, that's where the liner will come. But at the back here, let me show you a couple of points. What I want to try and do, if I take the spade, is to dig in a little bit deeper so I can place in position a row of stones to start my rockery at the back. And I want those stones to actually sit in the water. It'll look far more natural. So I could dig away something like 2 inches or so when those stones sit on the liner, they're just 2 inches into the water. But that peg has given me the perfect level. I know just how much to take off. So the back's fairly easy. That's going to be a row of stones to start the rock garden. It's going to look natural with them in water. But at the front, I've got a slightly different problem. Here, well, my peg's still out of the ground, so I need to raise this up before I fold the liner out. Otherwise, the water would spill out of the front before it completely filled the rest of the pool. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cheat a little here. I'm going to use some upturned turfs in a row all the way round, and when they're just bedded down there, they'll give me just the right height. So I can run those down to there, and I can run them all the way round there. So that gives me the perfect level. I've checked the bottom, I've scraped it through, but I've got a slight problem. This soil is a little bit stony. If there's any stones or objects in, look at this one down here for instance. Stone like that, if I put the liner in, even over one of these underlays we use in ponds, there's a danger as it's filling up or over the years as it's established, that might wear through the liner and the underlay. So the best thing to do is always to take them out. And that creates a hole like that. So what I would suggest you do is get a spade, some nice soft sand, don't want any grittiness in it, and we're going to fill that up. And the easiest way to do that is to take a trowel like that, plaster it over it, and then just round it off so it's nice and level. Any undulations like that, we bind in some sand, used on the back of the trowel, whatever you like, to cover up those so we don't have any problems with stones digging through. We go round the walls like that, and we also go, if you're in any doubt, across the base like that. Once about 1 inch or so, you can use a little bit of wood if you choose, just to make sure that it's perfectly level. That stops the underlay digging in, it stops the actual liner digging in. Right, what's the next stage? Well, you get to the side. And I think this is a good stage to be at on a nice, warm, sunny day, because I would take something like the liner there and unfold it on a sunny lawn or patio to get nice and warm and supple. That's important. And while that's happening, you need to put in an underlay. Now, you buy proper pond underlays like this. Traditionally, people would have used a variety of things, from old carpet, which of course can rot and can cause problems, newspapers which would disintegrate. I think it's well worth spending just a few shillings more and putting a proper underlay in. So you unfold this, and this one requires 2 pieces of matting like this, and I'm going to take them across the pool so the join comes across here. So this is the edge to, if you like, start upon. There's plenty of spare, so what I do is take it across in strips, put a brick on that piece there, put a brick on the piece there, just to hold it in place for the moment, and then unfold it. And it's going to take about 4 strips to go across the pool. And what we do is fold it into each of the shelves nice and carefully, like that, and weight it down with stones as you go. So we do the whole of the pool in strips across like that. Then we can start and put the liner in once this is held in place and it nicely protects the liner. Well, there we are, that's all the protective layer in. We're now almost ready for the liner. You'll see that I've allowed plenty on the edge here. Although I've folded it into the terraces, when I put the liner in place, I'm never quite sure whether some of that will slide, so I always like to leave plenty and trim it later just to finish the job off. I've neatly folded, especially in the curves there, so I haven't got large pockets where it bunches up, so it'll lay nice and flat underneath the liner. Pick a nice still day, a nice warm day, sunny day, when that liner can be laid out for an hour or so. It then becomes very supple and easy to install, and well, all I need is the help of 3 nice young lads. We'll get onto the liner, place it in one go, and it should be nice and soft and subtle. That feels fine, gentlemen. A little military operation, just a little bit of tension on it, so you don't catch the underlay underneath. Your way, just a fraction, gentlemen, perhaps. Just a fraction, that's lovely. And then we're going to use some bags of sand here, just to hold it in place. Now, various ways you can put a liner in. I prefer to use water and allow the weight of the water to draw the liner in. Other people will fold it in, but I think this is a neat way. Don't use any sharp objects, but you can use large boulders, you can use breeze blocks, that sort of thing, just to hold it in place. One on each corner, and then a hose pipe, and the help of yet another colleague and a little bit of water. We'll lay that in there, and then we just retire for a little while that fills into shape and gradually takes on the look of a proper pool. Now, one of the problems as the pool begins to fill, we can see here creases forming, and if we keep easing these bags of sand off, we'll still have a slight problem. So what I tend to do when we reach this stage is to completely remove them. Roll it out of the way, let the liner go in like that. You can see here we've got rather a large fold. Don't worry about it, just fold him nice and flat, work your way round, easing those folds in. They will take the shape as we go, and we work all the way around. You see that one now is gradually disappearing, and you see that one's going in there just nicely like that. We've now got about 4 inches to go to fill it. Fill in these folds as we go all the way round. As you can see, our pond here is almost full, so it's time to turn that tap off. We can actually remove the hose pipe now and consider that edge trim. It's quite interesting. I want to use paving slabs on the edge, not rectangular ones, but ones designed to go around a curve. And I like to see them over the edge of the pool. I've just been trying this one in place, and you can see here there's room to get my fingers underneath. I want to bring that over, not too far so it'll slip over, something like an inch or so will be about right, something like that. And then I want to line them up so they look in the right direction. And that is a curve going in that direction. As I come to the end of the curve and it reverses itself, I've turned the slab round the other way there. So I think that's the easy way to do it, to turn like that. Now, when I've got these in line, I'm going to trim both the butyl liner here. You can see the butyl there. Well, in this case, it's pondoline. It's quite a strong material for it. And there's the underlay. I can trim this along with a pair of scissors there as we go and work my way around the pool to get a tidier job. Now, traditionally, these are set on a bed of sand and cement, something like 3 parts of sand to 1 part cement. Use gritty sand or soft sand, about a ½ inch layer all the way along, and then we're going to set them like that, neatly point them up. But I like the slab to just slightly slope backwards, especially if there's a lawn at the back edge here. And if there was a lawn, I would re-turf this area so the turf finishes just ½ inch or so above the slab, so when I'm mowing around the edge of the pool, I don't catch the edging slab. Now, I said slope that back. That is very important. If I slope it back, A, anybody walking towards the edge of the pool and standing on the slabs, it's less dangerous sliding into the pool. But B, and I think most importantly, if we use any weed killers on the turf, any fertilisers, there's less danger of it leaching through the soil, running over the slabs and getting in the pool. And of course the nitrates in the fertiliser would only help turn the pool green. So whatever we do, we're going to keep those just sloping back slightly. We'll set those on some cement in a bit, show you how it goes. So that's the edging trim where we are using slabs. We could turf to the edge like that. One piece of turf, as we said earlier, upside down, one on top, and then mow around the edge. That makes quite a nice finish. But at the back here, I did promise you we were going to set a rock garden in. So there's a slightly different technique for cutting off the surplus liner. Here's a superb stone for edging. It's got a nice face to it. It's got a little bit of a curve, so it looks as though it wants to go along the back there. So the first thing to do is finish those tucks off, as we said, get them nicely in place, and then to lift the stone into the position we want it. And again, these can be bedded on a little mortar and mortared together if you wish. But I find usually you can get them in the position you want. And in this instance, I like to bring the liner up the back there and trim it at the back. Because remember we said earlier that we'd allowed for these to sit in the water an inch or so, so when the pond is completely filled, they'll look as though they're part of the water line. You won't actually see the gap there of the liner underneath. So we dug out that extra couple of inches, we bring it up the back here, otherwise the water would run out of the back and empty the pool. So I think all that's required now is that big pair of scissors again, and I'll trim around the liner. And as I say, we'll work all the way round like that. These are surplus bits, don't throw them away, they might be useful for something. It's a very durable material, it's worked well in this pool. It's a little bit cheaper than some of the other materials, but I'd like to leave this, finish it at a later date, and show you an adjacent pond where they've used butyl. Well, here we are, here's the finished pool. In this case it's butyl we've used. Same sort of installation ideas, either bags of sand, bricks or blocks to ease it in gently, or you can just fold it in and try and lose those ridges. But now we've got the rocks in shape, and just look at these. We've used the face of the rocks to create almost like a ravine, a cliff face in fact. Bedded on the cement that we talked about, a 3-in-1 mix, 3 parts sharp sand, 1 part cement. And once we'd filled it and established the levels, we had to drain it again to carry out this construction work. That's not a bad idea because there's always debris blowing in, there's always debris washing in that first time or two. So you do this on the dry, setting those blocks in. Don't overhang the edge too much like that one, otherwise they might tip in. But remember that water's going to come up to there. So we worked around the back doing that. There's also one little tip we can give you. Because in the pool here, if I turn to this side, we might want to put, say, an electric pump, electric lighting or a heater in the winter to stop it freezing. You need to go and get a cable into the pool. And if you've either used rocks all the way round or slabbed all the way round, it's rather difficult. So we've actually left a hole here so we can either put a piece of pipe in to keep it open or just leave a hole or a gap between 2 rocks for any electricity cables or services to go into the pond there or to come out of the pond, whichever way you look at it. So do leave that little gap. Now let me move forward slightly and just show you the butyl joining here, because don't get worried about these. The weld sheets of absat, butyl, pondoline, they can weld them together to any size that you want. They're very strong welds as long as they're laid as we've instructed you. So there's the join, and that leads me on to this nice paving. Remember a few minutes ago I showed you how to just experiment and make sure it would fit all the way around like that. Well, you might need to do a little bit of cutting, and of course there's various cutters you can hire for cutting slabs. We've got the little overhang that we suggested, and now there's a little test to see whether we've put them in at the right sort of angle. Because remember, we wanted just a gentle slope back away from the water. We've laid it on about a 1/2 inch thick layer of 3 parts sand, 1 part cement, a fairly dryish mix so it doesn't make a mess on the liner. We tapped them down into place, got them at the right angle, and then we've filled the little crack there. We leave something like 3/8 to 1/2 inch gap there, filled in with a mixture and pointed up, just a little bit of pointing so the water would run out. It won't freeze in there and crack and cause damage to the slab. So I think that's all we need to say about installation of flexible liners. So let's leave that and move on and show you how to install a rigid pool. Well, this is my semi-rigid liner. It's not as hard as a fiberglass one. It's a lot cheaper. It's made by a heat process that bends it to this shape. It's very useful. It's light to take home. It's fairly easy to install. You can see here we've got a rim on it, and we've got a first shelf round about there, and then a second shelf and a base just there. And it's quite important when we install it that we get it level. So what I did was I laid it out on the area, marked around the two shelves and dug out. Now it's quite critical that the very base of this is level, because if it's out either way, then the rim itself will not be level. Of course, water finds its own level, it won't look natural. So I've used 1.5 to 2 inches of sand in the bottom there. You can see the spirit level is reading level, so we can actually remove that now, take it out of the way, and we can install the pool. It's a relatively simple process, providing you've measured it properly. I say it's quite a lightweight, so it's something you can almost do on your own, providing it's a still day like this. Lower it in, get it in the right place to fit, feet out of the way, and now it's just going to sit on that layer of sand which we know is level. We could check it by putting the spirit level across, and then we need to fill in the sides. Now it's interesting, if we started to fill straight way, we'd push it out of true. So what I tend to do is get a good water supply. If we have a little bit of water on, I'm going to put some water in there as I backfill it. That's holding the pool in place, it's not going to move, it's holding it at the shape I want. At the same time, I've got a gap down the front edge here. I can start and work in some sand. It's not a difficult process. Could use fine soil if you wish. Of course, sand is great for finding its own level. So all I tend to do is drop it in handfuls. And there's various ways of backfilling that in there. You can use your hand and pack it in. But of course, that's never very accurate. So a little tip that I learnt the other day was just give it a little flush along like that, and the water will wash the sand down. Don't put too much in, or else you'll find that you'll get too much water, it'll bulge the sides. But we continue doing that until we've filled it right to the rim. It's quite interesting because from here on it's exactly the same as a flexible liner. We've got a rim, we can either slab on it, we can turf to it. In this instance we've got little gaps already for the electricity supply if we want to put it in. So from here on it's identical to a flexible liner. This is an indestructor plastic type one, and a fiberglass one is absolutely identical. And here's our completed pool. Given a few days for the water to settle down, we can add the aquatic plants and plant the rockery at the back to disguise the tank for the filter. One interesting aspect we haven't really discussed the construction of is the addition of a waterfall or rock fall with a series of pools. Now you can either do this when you initially build that pool, or you can add it as we are here at a later date. You know, it looks really natural as we've got here a bank. It just lends itself for water oozing out into a series of little tiny pools, working its way down to the main pool at the bottom. Now you can do this in a number of ways. You can buy ready-made rigid sections of either fiberglass or plastic, and you can set them in steps like this, so the water runs off one, over the lip, down into the lower one, out, down into the next one, and eventually into the pool. That's great on a small scale, and it can be made to look very natural, as long as it matches the stone you're using around the pool. Or if you've got a larger scale one like this, you may want to use a liner. And I think it'd be rather nice to fold in a liner and create these little tiny pools. And I want something that's going to bend easily, go around the stones I'm going to use. So I might use perhaps butyl or absat, but remember absat's about half the price of butyl, so it's going to be much cheaper. But you need something that's very flexible to bend around the steps. What I would want to do is to bring it down each of these steps first, tuck it in the side so it keeps the water in, and then to build a series of little tiny walls out of natural stone on the liner, and at the back of it I have to point it up with a cement mix so the water doesn't run through, it comes over the top. And they want to be perfectly level so the water just gently oozes over, down into the next pool, over the next step, and then at the very bottom here I'd want to bring the liner along the base section and tuck it up these large stones. This is an existing pool, and underneath the stones the liner's nicely trapped, so I don't want to move those. So what I can do is bring it up and then use some similar stones, fairly flat, same colour, laid on to hide the edge of the liner. That'll mask it perfectly. and then we'll have something that looks like a really natural rock stream or pool. Let's get on and let's get it finished off. Isn't that attractive? Doesn't it look natural? Just shows you what you can do with some local stone laid on those terraces we cut out of the soil. We've got little terraces going out into the grass, pockets we can plant with dwarf shrubs and alpines. We've got a truly natural waterfall here, a valuable feature to any garden pond. Having selected the fish we want, that's the oxygen going in, quite an important process that allows us to transport the fish in a car or anywhere shady and cool, not on the hot shelf. And then we can put that bag in a box, if you like, something like the one we've got resting there. That stops it falling over, stops the fish getting trapped in the corner. We then take that along to our garden pool. This is quite important, by the way. Don't put them in on a very hot sunny day. Wait till the evening, keep the fish cool a little bit. They're quite all right with the oxygen in there. And then we allow that bag to float in the water. That allows the temperature to equalise out between the two. And I would let that float for perhaps 15 or 20 minutes or so. And then what I would suggest is you roll the top of the bag down, something like this. So it makes it far easier to get the fish out at the end of the day, and it's far easier to get a little bit of water in. Roll it down so it's almost on the surface of the water there. And then take each 5-10 minutes a little water from the pond to acclimatise it. Every 5 minutes for the next quarter of an hour we do that. So after 15 minutes or so, we can then either gently lower the bag into the water and allow the fish to swim out, or we can use a little tiny net to enable them to get over the edge, making sure they don't get trapped in the corner. They will swim out of their own free accord. Isn't that beautiful? It's hard to believe it's only 6 weeks ago we started to build our garden pool. It took us just a couple of days to dig out the soil and install the liner. We've used the soil to build a rockery and a waterfall there. Then we filled the pool and left it for 3 weeks for the water to settle down. Then we added the aquatic plants, all the different sections as we described before. We left it a further 3 weeks, in fact, until just a couple of hours ago when we added the fish. There's only one thing to do now, and that's to sit back and really enjoy your garden pond.